Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
Greetings. This is Joel Sullivan. I'm here at the Commonwealth Club, and I'm here with Steve Van Zandt. You may remember me from writing for the San Francisco Chronicle. I write books now. My latest, Hollywood Eden. You can find that wherever fine books are sold. We're not here to talk about my book. We're here to talk about Steve Van Zandt's book, Unrequited Infatuations, brand new this week from Hachette Books. Steve, welcome to the Commonwealth Club.
Nice to see you, Joel.
Good to be with you. May I take a minute and introduce you to the audience who, of course, you probably don't require to be introduced to, but we're dealing here with music world's #1 multitasker. As a musician, he's a guitarist, he's a songwriter, he's a band leader, he's a solo artist, he's a record producer. He's been the guitar player with Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band for 1,000,000 years. He was a founding member of the Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes. He was their record producer. He's produced Ronnie Spector, Darlene Love, Archangels, a million others. Actor is, the world's most famous television show, The Sopranos, and Silvio Dante and Lilyhammer, the first network series. That's where he starts out in the acting field. As a broadcaster, he had the last great syndicated radio show, Little Steven's Underground Garage, and that turned into an entire XM Sirius channel, 24 hours, 7 days a week. As an activist, he's been involved in political concerns, international, national, charitable things like Little Kids Rock. He's been involved in Nicaraguan politics. He's been involved in African politics very successfully. Broadway producer, the Rascals show, but he also had his fingerprints in the Burt Burns musical too. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominating committee. I've seen his act there. He walked in halfway through the meeting, didn't even sit down, just like put his bags down and started in on some impassioned speech. I think it was the Dave Clark 5, was it? Anyway, he left Rosemary Carroll in tears, and his point had been made. And academics, this is something you don't know about unless you finish the book, I'm sure, is that Steve has caused to have an entire academic program on the history of rock and roll to be created, to be integrated into classrooms all over the country. I did a little work on that too. And now he's the author of a sure-to-be best-selling memoir. That's little Steven Van Zandt, folks. Good thing you don't play golf. You can never get any of this done.
Yeah, well, you were a pretty damn good author yourself, kid.
Why did you decide to write this book now, Steve?
Well, you know, this quarantine thing going on, and all of a sudden you had some free time on your hands, thanks to some extraordinary incompetency, but we don't want to get into that. A couple of things, really. It was the last. I think what really made the difference was the previous 3 years, 2017, 18, 19. By some bizarre circumstance, I had the most productive 3 years of my entire life. I reformed Disciples of Soul. I put out 2 albums, Soulfire and Summer of Sorcery, and released 6 different album packages in 3 years, which is extremely productive for me, and I was very happy about that. And combined with, I got some new managers. I really never had managers in my life, which is, you'll read about in the book quite often, the source of my problems. And the managers suggested I do the book. It felt like a good time. And so with their encouragement, and actually the managers actually suggested the end of the book which was helpful to me to give me a little bit of closure. And like I said, having reconnected with my life's music work these previous 3 years, which I ignored for literally 30 years, really helped me feel like that I got a little closure on that chapter of my life. So, combination of circumstance and like I say, reconnecting with music after I really abandoned it for a long time.
I love that. You reconnected with music, so you decided to write a book. That makes sense in some kind of backwards way. But tell me, what's with this title? They aren't unrequited, and they aren't infatuations. What? The publisher must have loved this title.
My publisher did love his title. I offered simpler ones. He said, no, let's go back to the complicated one. I'll tell you what it's about. Okay, it takes a minute to explain, but
we got time.
Yeah. My life has been a very odd life, as you'll read. And I've had some amazing successes, obviously with the E Street Band, with Sopranos, with Lilyhammer and the Sun City Project. But most of my life, my most personal work has never found an audience. Now, I think, in my own mind, I'm searching for the bigger themes, because I just felt, the first half of the book is going to be a kid from New Jersey grows up and makes it in rock and roll, and that's a great story, and I don't take that for granted at all, But the second half of the book is where it gets a little more interesting. To me, because now it becomes a bigger, the bigger themes start to emerge, the search for identity, the search for purpose, the search for spiritual enlightenment, the kind of things that I think most people go through in their lives. And I think everybody has some frustration and some disappointment in their lives. So that's not the question. The question is, what happens after that? Okay, now you've experienced disappointment and frustration at some point. Do you give up? Does that stop you? Does that kill you? Does that inspire you in some bizarre way? Does it? The main point is finding a way to move on past that personal disappointment and frustration. So I think everybody feels a bit of that, and in my case, I feel it in spite of my wonderful successes. I feel it with my own personal work. My own most personal work has never found an audience to this day.
Well, of course, I sense that, and I heard Brian Wallace work you over about this on MSNBC the other night, but it's not true that this stuff didn't find its audience, or whatever you're missing out on that you're frustrated by. Like, take the Darlene Love thing. I mean, I wish I could have seen that show. Half of the people that were there must have told me about it. And the fact is, the work speaks for itself, and the work's been done. And that is what matters. That's your accomplishment. You can't take anything away from it just because nobody showed up to see it.
No. Don't get me wrong, Joel. You're absolutely right. And in no way am I saying I'm unhappy with my work artistically. In fact, the book gave me a chance to really go back and really examine it, and I could be pretty objective about it. And I tell you the truth, I wouldn't change a thing. I'm very proud of the work, especially that Darlene Love album, which again, yes, it's fantastic because she's the greatest singer in the world, and I had the greatest songwriters in the world write songs for her. But it was the perfect ending for 20 Feet from Stardom, Joel. And I thought this is going to be the end of the happy ending to the movie. We're going to win album of the year, obviously, because I know it's the album of the year. There's no question about that. And we get signed to Sony, and I thought, that's it, man. Sony Records is signing a 73-year-old woman for her debut album. I mean, this is the perfect end of the movie, and we didn't even get nominated. Okay, so
but the work stands for itself.
The work stands for itself, and there's nothing wrong with the work. But
whenever anybody wants to look at the career of Darlene Love, that's just sitting there like the gem it should be.
Yeah, but you got to admit, it's a little bit frustrating and disappointing, that more people didn't hear it, because for her sake, not for me, but for her sake. I mean, she deserves a bigger audience, and it's a shame. I mean, I tried like hell to get her to, get the promoters to bring it to Europe, because I think Europe would go nuts for Darlene Love, and I couldn't. Nobody was interested, man. Nobody was interested. So it's a little bit disappointing,
So you're on the promo trail now, and how did your book talk with Bruce go? How does he like the book? Does he have any complaints?
Well, that was a wonderful conversation, and no, he really, really likes the book. The first thing I did was, because he plays such a major role in the book, I sent the book to him, and I sent the book to Bob Dylan, because he's in the book quite a bit also. And I said to them, listen, check it out. And if if you remember something differently than I do, or if there's something that, you really bothers you, because there were some rather intimate conversations that I'm putting into the book, which I usually don't, I wouldn't normally do. So I wanted to make sure they were cool with it, because I didn't want the book to be about that. I didn't want to make any Bruce news. I didn't want to, be gossipy in any kind of way. I wanted to stick to the important themes. But those two guys are very, very important to me, and they both read the book, and neither one of them, changed one word. They didn't change one single word. So I was very, very happy about that. But I would have had either Bruce or Bob said, "Hey, that was a private conversation. Let's leave that out." I would have taken it right out, because that's not what this book's about.
Oh, there's so many reasons to like this book, and there's plenty of details and tell-all moments and reallys that nobody's going to go away feeling like they got cheated like that. But to me, the most surprising thing is I didn't know that you had woodshedded as musical director of the Dovells. Can I take just a minute and refresh everybody to what we're talking about here?
Cameo Parkway. Classic.
I just love that you worked as their musical director in the oldies period, and to me that's illuminating, because I don't believe that's the sound of 1962, and that sound of 1962 is preserved in the E Street Band, isn't it?
Yeah, and the Jukes and almost everything I've ever done. I like to hear the roots in my work. I really, it makes me relate to it easier. And I like feeling like I'm part of that tradition. You know what I mean? It's frankly, it's easy to do something completely original. It's easier to do that than actually do something with traditional roots and have it hold up as well as those traditional roots. It's one of those things that I'm very proud of the fact that we carry on that tradition, and yeah, you can hear it in the E Street Band all over the place, and the Jukes, the Darlene Love album, and all my solo records, quite a few of them anyway. You're going to hear that. You're going to hear those roots, and that was sort of my final year of education for my own self-education. That year in that 1973, it was really kind of an odd kind of peaking year of nostalgia for some reason. Richard Nader's having those multi-artist events at arenas. That's the first time I played Madison Square Garden. You got I think Happy Days is about to come on TV, and
American
Good
Graffiti.
Times, the movie, and American Graffiti. That was all happening around that same moment, right in that 72, 73, 74 period. And I'm on that circuit with these guys who are now being called oldies, and they're in their late 30s, early 40s, and you know, and man, they were not happy about that, man. And the British invasion had the unintended consequence of putting all their heroes out of work. And if you had 3 hits when the Beatles hit, you played those 3 hits the rest of your life. For those pioneers, for the guys who invented rock and roll. It was so ironic and so tragic that that's the only generation that happened to. That actually got put out to pasture. Every other generation grew up and evolved with the artists. I mean, who were the biggest artists in '64? The Beatles and Stones. Who's the biggest artist now? The Beatles and Stones. As it should be, But the first generation, just kind of got pushed aside, And so the minute I got in the studio, man, I started bringing them out of retirement as quickly as I could. I had Ronnie Spector and Lee Dorsey on the Jukes' first album, and we reunited the Drifters and Coasters and Five Satins on the Juke second album. Me and Bruce worked with Gary U.S. Bonds, and we had Chuck Jackson and Benny King on those records, and then of course the Darlene Love record. And it's such a joy to work with those people, Joel. I mean, they're different, okay? They're a different species. Those 50s and early 60s people. I mean, you actually had to have talent in those days. There was no tuning the vocals. Or even, much editing, you had to get it right the first time. And man, they were just so talented and so much fun to work with and so much fun to produce, I wish we'd done more of it.
Well, I found that just wonderful that you'd woodshedded with the DeVelles. That seemed just so perfect to me. Yeah, and also another scene that really that I'd love for you to like draw out a little bit for us here tonight is so you and Bruce have been friends for years, played music, you've been in his band, you've been out of his band, been in his band, out of band, and you go up to Brooks Arthur's studio and he plays you Born to Run. What a moment that must have been. Were you prepared for that? I certainly wasn't. I'd heard the first 2 albums and it was a heavy deal to drop that needle on that track.
Very big change, profoundly different. And it's a little hard to, it reminds me a little bit of, Jimi Hendrix at the Cafe Wha, and then 6 months later, he was Jimmy James, this R&B guitar player, and then 6 months later, Jimi Hendrix, and he's playing and writing these incredibly cosmic songs out of nowhere. It was that kind of dramatic change. All I can offer is at that point, Bruce just dug deep down and knew that he was in trouble. His career was in trouble. The first 2 records didn't do much, and they were getting ready to drop them. And he just said, "I'm going to put everything I know and into this one song." And man, and they worked on it for months, that one song, and yeah, it just it totally blew me away. It was the beginning of this radical transformation he was about to make personally, also into a whole different kind of performer for that Born to Run tour. That's why I ended up joining the band, because he wanted to start fronting, putting the guitar down, which changed everything in his head and in his persona and in his success. But that moment was we talked about it the other night when he interviewed me, and he picked up the guitar and actually showed what exactly happened. But he plays me the song. They've been working on it for months. They were so proud of it and so happy, and it was a lot of work. And keep in mind, the mixes in those days were not automated. So 3 guys would stand at the board, and each would move a fader